If you're over 60 and you wake up bloated, tired, and foggy no matter what you eat, there's a hidden reason, and it's not your age. Most people over 60 have simply accepted that digestion slows down with age, and there's nothing to be done about it. But that assumption might be exactly what's keeping you stuck, tired, and uncomfortable in your own body, year after year. Inside your gut right now live trillions of microorganisms working around the clock to keep you alive and functioning at your best. Scientists call this hidden universe your microbiome, and researchers have found it influences far more than digestion. It shapes your immune defenses, your brain chemistry, your skin, and even how quickly your body recovers from illness. When this ecosystem is thriving, you feel it in your energy and mood. When it's damaged, you feel that too, often without realizing the two are connected. Here's the part almost nobody talks about openly. Many of the daily habits older adults consider completely normal, or even healthy, are quietly wrecking this internal ecosystem, one small decision at a time. It isn't always the obvious culprits either. Some of the very things you've been advised to do to protect your health after 60 could actually be working directly against you. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which 7 everyday mistakes are silently destroying your gut microbiome as you age, and what you can start doing today to reverse the damage. Stick around, because mistake number 4 is one that almost every senior makes without realizing it, and it might be sitting in your medicine cabinet or your refrigerator right now. So watch this all the way through, and if you find it valuable, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Mistake number 7. Relying too heavily on antibiotics without rebuilding afterward. As we age, our immune systems naturally become less efficient at fighting off infection, which means older adults are prescribed antibiotics far more frequently than younger people. While antibiotics can absolutely be life-saving in the right circumstances, very few people realize just how much collateral damage they leave behind in the gut. Antibiotics don't discriminate between good and bad bacteria. They eliminate harmful microbes, yes, but they also wipe out the beneficial bacteria that took years, sometimes even decades, to establish themselves inside you. Research has found that a single course of antibiotics can disrupt the balance of your gut flora for months at a time, and in some cases, the damage can linger for years afterward before full diversity is restored, if it ever fully is. For someone over 60, whose microbiome is often already less diverse than it was in their 30s or 40s, this kind of disruption hits significantly harder and takes much longer to bounce back from. The solution isn't to avoid antibiotics entirely when they're genuinely medically necessary, but rather to be proactive about rebuilding what gets lost along the way. Taking a high-quality, targeted probiotic supplement during and after a course of antibiotics, and continuing to eat fermented foods consistently for several weeks afterward, gives your gut microbes a real fighting chance to recover, instead of leaving that ecosystem permanently thinned out and vulnerable to future imbalance. It's also worth mentioning that timing matters here. Taking your probiotics several hours apart from your antibiotic dose, rather than at the exact same time, helps ensure the beneficial bacteria actually survive long enough to colonize, rather than being wiped out immediately alongside the harmful ones. And once the antibiotic course ends, don't assume your gut simply resets on its own within a few days. Continued support for weeks afterward, through diet and targeted supplementation, is often what makes the real difference between a full recovery and a microbiome that stays quietly depleted for years. Mistake number 6. Long-term use of antacids and acid reducers. If you've been taking something for heartburn or acid reflux every single day for years, this next mistake may genuinely surprise you. Most people assume acid reflux happens because there's simply too much stomach acid, so the natural instinct is to suppress it with medication. But a growing body of research suggests the opposite is often closer to the truth, especially in older adults. As we age, stomach acid production naturally tends to decline, and when there isn't enough acid present, the valve at the top of the stomach doesn't close properly, which allows acid to creep upward and cause that familiar burning sensation in the chest. Your stomach actually requires a strong, highly acidic environment to properly break down protein, kill off harmful bacteria and pathogens you swallow along with food, and absorb critical minerals like calcium, iron, magnesium, and vitamin B12. When you chronically suppress that acid with daily medication, you're not simply masking an uncomfortable symptom. You're gradually weakening your overall digestive capacity and creating an environment where unfriendly bacteria can more easily survive and multiply in places they shouldn't. A clinical review focused on digestion and aging noted that long-term acid suppression is strongly associated with nutrient deficiencies and disrupted gut bacteria populations in older individuals. This certainly doesn't mean you should stop any medication without speaking to your doctor first, but it's absolutely worth having an honest, informed conversation about whether the underlying root cause is actually being addressed or simply masked. Many seniors have been on these medications for so long that they no longer remember what life felt like without them, which makes it even more difficult to recognize the slow, cumulative toll on digestion and nutrient absorption. Some doctors now recommend a gradual, supervised tapering approach paired with digestive support like betaine hydrochloride or bitter herbs before meals, specifically to help the body relearn how to produce adequate acid naturally again. This isn't a decision to make alone or overnight, but it's a conversation worth starting sooner rather than later. Mistake number 5. Choosing the wrong probiotics and sugar-loaded yogurts. Walk down any grocery store aisle and you'll see dozens of products proudly marketed as gut-friendly, but not all of them actually deserve that label. Many mass-produced, store-bought probiotic supplements contain shockingly little live, active bacteria by the time they actually reach your shelf, let alone survive the journey into your gut. And that seemingly healthy cup of yogurt sitting in your refrigerator? Standard commercial yogurt is frequently low in fat while being packed with added sugar, starches, and thickening agents that end up feeding the wrong kind of bacteria entirely, the kind associated with inflammation rather than healing. For older adults trying to restore a fragile, already depleted microbiome, this is essentially like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. A far better approach is choosing plain, organic, full-fat yogurt or grass-fed kefir with no added sugar, and looking specifically for probiotic supplements that clearly list exact bacterial strains and colony counts on the label, rather than vague marketing terms. Diversity matters enormously here as well. A recent review examining aging and gut bacteria found that older adults who maintained a wider variety of beneficial bacterial strains in their gut reported noticeably better digestion, stronger immune responses, and fewer inflammatory symptoms compared to those relying on a single generic probiotic source day after day. When shopping, it helps to think like a detective rather than a casual buyer. Flip the container around and look past the front label entirely. If the ingredient list reads more like a dessert, full of syrups, artificial flavorings, and gums, than an actual food, it's probably doing far less for your gut than the marketing suggests. Fermented foods made the traditional way, without pasteurization, which kills off the very bacteria you're trying to consume, tend to offer a far more reliable and affordable source of diverse, living microbes than most supplements sitting on pharmacy shelves. Mistake number 4. Following a low-fat diet for too long. For decades, older adults were told that dietary fat was the enemy, something to be avoided at nearly all costs in order to protect the heart. But this well-meaning advice may be quietly damaging your gut in a way almost nobody ever warned you about. Here's why this happens. Dietary fat triggers your gallbladder to release bile into your digestive tract. And bile does far more than simply help you digest fatty foods. It also acts as a natural detergent that prevents bacteria from migrating into places they shouldn't be, such as the small intestine, where they can cause serious problems. When you follow a low-fat diet for years on end, bile production gradually drops, and that important protective mechanism weakens considerably. Without enough stomach acid and bile working together as your body's natural defense system, bacteria can begin to overgrow in the small intestine, a condition strongly linked to persistent bloating, excess gas, and abdominal discomfort that's especially common among people over 60. Rather than continuing to fear healthy fats, incorporating quality sources like extra virgin olive oil, avocado, nuts, and fatty fish can actually support better bile flow and a noticeably healthier gut environment, all while simultaneously supporting brain function and cardiovascular health at the very same time. It's worth remembering that this outdated fear of dietary fat took hold decades ago. based on research that has since been significantly revised and, in many cases, reversed by newer studies. Yet the habit stuck around long after the science moved on, and an entire generation of older adults grew up believing that any visible fat on their plate was working against them. The reality is far more nuanced. It's not fat itself that's the problem, but rather the type and quality of fat, and cutting it out almost entirely removes a tool your digestive system actually needs to function properly. Mistake number 3, eating a diet heavy in ultra-processed foods. This particular mistake might seem obvious on the surface, but the specific way it damages your gut after 60 is anything but simple. Ultra-processed foods, think packaged snacks, frozen dinners, and sugary treats, don't just lack essential nutrients. They actively reshape your entire microbiome for the worse, often permanently. Studies have shown that diets high in processed food allow fat-loving, inflammatory bacteria to outcompete the beneficial species your body genuinely relies on. And once certain bacterial strains disappear from an already damaged gut, restoring them can take a significant amount of time, if it's even possible to bring them back at all. For seniors specifically, this matters enormously, because a poor diet doesn't just fail to nourish the body. It actively starves your gut of the raw materials your bacteria need to produce mood-regulating compounds like serotonin and calming neurotransmitters that keep you feeling emotionally steady. This connection becomes especially important after 60, since many seniors already report changes in mood, motivation, or emotional resilience that get attributed entirely to aging itself, when in reality, diet-driven changes in the gut may be playing a much bigger role than anyone realizes. Researchers have found that certain amino acids present in whole foods like turkey, eggs, nuts, and seeds are converted by healthy gut bacteria into essential hormones that regulate sleep quality, mood stability, and mental clarity throughout the day. Prioritizing whole, minimally processed meals isn't simply about managing weight or maintaining energy levels. It's fundamentally about protecting the biochemical foundation of how you think, feel, and function every single day of your life. A simple, practical starting point is reading labels with fresh eyes and asking a basic question before eating anything packaged. Does this food still resemble something that came from the earth, or has it been engineered in a factory to be convenient and shelf-stable above all else? That single habit alone, repeated consistently at the grocery store, can dramatically shift the overall quality of what's feeding your gut week after week. Mistake number 2, underestimating the impact of chronic stress. Many older adults assume stress is purely a mental or emotional issue, something entirely separate from physical health concerns. But your gut and your brain are in constant, direct communication through what scientists refer to as the gut-brain axis, a two-way highway of signals running between them. When stress becomes chronic, whether it stems from health worries, loneliness, grief, or ongoing financial pressure, that delicate signaling pathway gets disrupted. And it shows up physically in the form of bloating, irregular digestion, and even measurable changes to the actual bacterial populations living inside your gut. A study examining chronic stress and gut health found that prolonged stress exposure was associated with reduced microbial diversity and increased intestinal inflammation, particularly among older adult populations facing ongoing life stressors. The encouraging news is that this pathway genuinely works in both directions. Simple daily practices like deep breathing exercises, gentle meditation, spending time in nature, or even taking a short daily walk have all been shown to calm this stress response and, in turn, support a noticeably healthier, more balanced gut over time. Protecting your mental well-being after 60 isn't a separate project from protecting your digestion. In many important ways, they're actually the very same project. This is particularly relevant for seniors who may be navigating major life transitions, such as retirement, the loss of a spouse or close friends, or a sudden shift in independence, all of which can quietly elevate stress levels for extended periods without ever being labeled as stress in the traditional sense. Recognizing these transitions as genuine physical stressors on the body, not just emotional experiences to push through, opens the door to taking gut protective steps like social connection, gentle movement, and structured relaxation, far more seriously than most people typically do. Mistake number 1. Neglecting fiber diversity and fermented foods. Finally, one of the most consistently overlooked mistakes isn't about eating too much of any one thing. It's about not eating enough genuine variety across the board. Your gut bacteria are remarkably specialized in what they consume. Different species thrive on different types of fiber, plant compounds, and fermented foods, which means a narrow, repetitive diet, even one that seems relatively healthy on paper, can leave entire populations of beneficial bacteria without the specific fuel they need to survive and multiply. Over time, this lack of variety in your diet translates directly into a lack of diversity within your microbiome, and lower microbial diversity has been consistently linked in research to weaker immune function and elevated inflammation levels among older adults. The good news is that the fix doesn't require a complicated overhaul of your entire diet. Rotating in a wide variety of vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds throughout the week, alongside fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, and naturally fermented pickles, gives your gut microbes the varied fuel source they genuinely need to flourish long-term. Think of it less like following a strict, rigid diet plan, and more like tending a garden that requires many different nutrients scattered throughout the week in order to grow well and stay resilient. A helpful mental trick many nutritionists recommend is aiming to eat a certain number of different plant-based foods across each week, counting herbs, spices, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and whole grains, all toward that total. Most people are surprised to discover just how repetitive their usual diet actually is once they start counting. And even small additions, like trying one new vegetable or swapping in a different type of bean, can meaningfully expand the range of bacteria your gut is able to support over time. Now that you know the 7 mistakes quietly working against your gut health, here's the truth that should give you real, genuine hope. None of this damage is permanent, and it is truly never too late to turn things around, no matter your age or how long these habits have been in place. Your microbiome is remarkably responsive to change, often shifting for the better within just a few weeks of consistent, smarter choices, which is far faster than most people expect. Start by picking just 1 or 2 of these 7 mistakes that felt most familiar to you personally, and focus your energy on correcting those first, rather than trying to overhaul everything at once and burning out before real change takes hold. Talk to your doctor honestly and openly about any long-term medications, particularly antacids, and ask thoughtful questions about whether they remain truly necessary or whether the underlying cause could be addressed differently. Consider adding a few servings of fermented food into your week, and pay closer attention to how your body responds as you rotate in more variety. Small, sustainable shifts, repeated consistently over weeks and months, are what genuinely rebuild a resilient, thriving gut microbiome, not a single dramatic overhaul that fades after a few days. Your gut health after 60 isn't something that has to steadily decline simply because of a number on a calendar or a birthday that's come and gone. It's something you have far more genuine control over than you've likely ever been told by the people around you. The choices you make this very week, the foods you put on your plate, the way you manage everyday stress, the honest conversations you have with your doctor about long-term medications, all of these ripple outward in ways that shape how you feel, think, and move through the rest of your life. Taking care of this hidden, hardworking ecosystem inside you is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do for your long-term vitality, your independence, and your overall quality of life in the years ahead. As we age, it's easy to assume decline is simply inevitable, but the science increasingly shows that a great deal of what we chalk up to just getting older is actually reversible once the gut is properly supported and cared for again. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.